Evidence for God in DNA itself. Lecture 5. Professor Dr. C. A. Nenan Trivandrum. In lecture 3 of this series, I had related the ladder pattern of DNA, that is the primary pattern of the DNA molecule, to life at the soul level. And in lecture 4, I had related the spiral pattern of the DNA molecule to life at the psyche level. In this lecture, I wish to relate the circular pattern of the DNA molecule to the genomic level of life, that is life at the physical level, and the inner wheel of the self, or the central axis, non-physical central axis of the DNA molecule to life at the highest level of the self. I shall start with the circular genome of prokaryotes. The prokaryote genomes are simple circles of DNA or RNA. The smallest of such circles are those of plasmids, as given below in figure 4.1 on page 25 of my book, Cosmic Code of Life. These are circular bits of DNA used in genetic engineering. In PSTV, that is potato spindle tumor virus, the rod-like genomes assume circularity before the onset of infectivity, indicating that circularity of the genome is perhaps essential for functional activity. Now I come to the circular genomes of cell organelles. The genomes of vital cell organelles, mitochondria and chloroplasts, are also circular, as shown in figure 4.2 on page 36 of the above book. As the genome is circular, the symbol of genome is selected here as a circle. This circle corresponds to the symbol O of the Christogram of DNA and denotes physical life at the level of the genome and the body which develops from the genome. Actually, the circle denotes endlessness or eternity. It has no beginning or end. While life is genetically linked to a circle, it is indeed a mystery that must be resolved to understand the nature of the life principle. You here see that the ladder turns into the spiral, and the spiral is a potential circle. While genomic DNA is a physical circle, its central axis is a virtual circle. The circular double helix is shown in figure 4.4. The latter is here called the axial circle, that is the central circle, is called the axial circle and is identified as the inner wheel of the self in the genome. This is mandala in terms of psychology and metaphysics. To avoid overlapping of the symbols of the physical genome, O, that is the symbol O, and the non-physical self as circles, the inner wheel of the self above mentioned is here seen to correspond to the central axis of the helix zone called the axon. The central axis of the helix zone is called the axon, as shown in figure 4.5. The helix zone, as already defined, is a potential circle, also called the helixonic circle, of which the axon is the diameter. Helixon and axon are terms which I have coined to denote the above entities, as shown in figure 4.5. The axon and the helixonic circle are given as dotted lines, and the helixon as the capital S in the circle. In fact, the axon, as above defined, corresponds to the capital I symbol of the Christogram and represent the name field of the self in the genome. So, this symbol I represents the name field of the genome. That is, I have attributed this to the name field of the genome, that is the highest field of the self. The axon I and the helixonic circles O together form the basis of the rod and ring symbols of the Bible, where the rod denotes the name field of the self and the ring denotes the form field or mandala of the self. There are very many instances of rod and symbols in the Bible and also in the liturgy. In fact, the finding in the molecular biology that the genome is a circle is only a belated attestation for the teaching of psychology that the symbol of the self is a circle. Psychologists call it the mandala, as I have already mentioned. According to Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, the chief archetype representing human striving for unity expresses itself through various symbols, the chief one being the mandala. It is a Sanskrit word meaning circle. In his book Psychology and Alchemy, Carl Jung developed a psychology of totality based on the mandala symbol. The main aim of the psychology is total unity in the self. According to another author, Gareth Knight, Knigst, it is a circular figure, that is the endless line, which best gives the idea of something which is self-contained, without beginning or ending, with no before or after, that is timeless, with no above or below, without space. Space and time, beginning and ending, come only with the coming of light or consciousness. The sex symbols of biology, from psychology as we pass on to biology, you find that the sex symbols of biology shown below actually came via the mandala of metaphysics millennia before the circularity of the genome was discovered by molecular biologists. Figure 4.6 gives the male, female and bisexual symbol of bisexuality based on the circle. By this discovery, biologists have only attested the metaphysical and religious teaching that the symbol of the self is a circle. As I have already shown in my first and second lectures, the IHSO or the church designed or perceived by the church nearly 2000 years ago is seen to overlap with the same symbols perceived from DNA. Similarly, the circle perceived long ago by religions and later by psychologists is now seen as the symbol of the self in molecular biology. This presents the idea that the circular genome is a physical chariot of the non-physical self. As biologists cannot deal physically with the non-physical self, they must logically posit the self in the genome. In fact, the word me ending of the genome denotes the self itself. The word genome starts with the gene and ends in the self. The circle is thus the archetype of the non-physical self in the physical genome. This relation is and can only be attributed. Tracing the developments in this series I have made, we have started with the study of the IHSO symbols of the church, and we have so far traced the IHSO symbols as common to molecular biology and the church. These are shown below in their hierarchical relations in table 4.1, that is common symbols IHSO of the Christogram and DNA. And you will see from the table that the central axis is related to the self, the ladder pattern of DNA is related to the soul, the helical pattern related to the psyche, and the circle to the genome. So these metaphysical terms used by philosophers and religions are now being posited in the DNA molecule itself. This reveals that science and religions, or science and metaphysics, or the objective sciences and the subjective principles on life are not enemies of each other. They are not to be classified as enemies or opposites. Now, what remains in the Christogram of the church to be related to DNA formats as is the cross symbol for the letter H, to which I shall turn later perhaps in the next lecture. In what follows, I shall relate the self to the genome, or try to posit the self in the genome. Knowledge of the self as that of the spirit and soul originally belongs to what is called the esoteric truths on life, as provided by metaphysics and religions. The self is a very elusive entity, but one as real as the genome itself. Scientists speak of the conscious self and have not yet succeeded to posit it logically in the cell, or more precisely in the genome. The self is a very elusive entity, but one as real as the genome itself. In fact, the me ending of the word genome, as I have already mentioned, esoterically and etymologically signifies the self. It is the self that ultimately denotes a person. This takes us to the intriguing question, who is a person, which will remain unanswered which has still remained unanswered in medico-legal circles. The framework of esoteric knowledge on the self provides ample access for seekers in life science to explore, analyze, and discuss the profound issues linking the self to the genome of biology, the self of metaphysics and religion to the genome of biology. In fact, The double helix can be used as a teaching point on the self. Here, one has to cross many thresholds to encounter the self in the sanctum sanctorum of the genome. The path from the genome to the self is plane breaking, and so it is not one that rigid science can keep track with. So it breaks the planes of the physical to the mental, then to the soulful, then the spiritual, and finally to the name field of the self. That is the hierarchical sequence of this path. The trajectory of the self goes even beyond the boundaries of the genome in a transcendence which one has to reach in the Hegelian way of transformation from quantity to quality, which Engels called qualitative leap. Here, the object is the circular genome of biology, and the subject is the circular self of psychology, metaphysics, and religion. We really need a plane breaking ideologue to fathom the genetic depths of knowledge on the self. For this, we need to have clear concept of the self, including the dialectical. I shall start with the dialectical approach to the self. As the self is the deepest center of personality, where opposites integrate, a method of positing the self in the double helix is dialectical of the two strands of DNA. Thus, one is positive and the other is negative, as is also the case with Jacob's ladder, which, as we have already seen, is ascending and descending. And I have also instituted comparison of the Jacob's ladder with the double helix in relation to the ascending and descending aspects and others in my previous class. Actually, they run in anti-parallel directions. This provides room for a dialectical approach of the self, which emerges from the opposites of the animus and anima as psychology sees. This is a psyche-level study of the self, as shown in figure 4.7 of my book, that is animus anima, symbol of the self, with the mandala as its center, as you can see from the figure. The symbol of the self, I, is the vertical aspect of the circular life field O called the mandala. The vertical I and horizontal O, that is the self, and the horizontal circle as genomic patterns define the planes of a cross symbol. The I and O are numerals also. The I and O as numerals also make the universal self number 10. So, by occult addition of 1 and 0, you get the 1. 10 equals 1 and 0, which add up together to the number 1, that is a Unitarian reality. And the circle represents the endlessness or eternity of life. So, the number 10 is a very important number in relation to the study of life, and I have already shown it through the picture of a segment of the DNA molecule with the number 10 representing 1 turn of the spiral. In 1 turn, you have 10 nucleotide bases. Then numerologically, according to the Chaldean numerology, D equals 4, N equals 5, and A equals 1. These add up to the number 10. Then again, in the genetic system, you have 64 triplets in the genetic code as the basis of the language of life, which is universal for all living things. This 64 number, basic to the genetic code, also add up to the number 10, that is 6 plus 4 equals 10 equals 1 plus 0 equals 1. That again reveals the mystery of the number 1 and also the number 10, which is in fact a God number. It is very interesting to know that 10 is a God number. Of which I shall present some details. Actually, I have given a list of such numbers on page 186 of my book, which you can refer for easy reference. I shall read it out. Number 1, 10 avatars of God in Hindu scriptures. 2, 10 potencies of the Godhead in Sephiroth of the Kabbalah. These are to be explained, but this can be done later. Number 3, 10 letters of the biblical I am that I am. That is the name of God given to Moses by him, to God himself. I am. Number 4, 10 plagues sent to Egypt by God. Number 5, 10 eternal qualities of God as defined in yogic texts. Number 6, 10 vital airs that inspire the being of the sacred Gayatri. Number 7, 10 vital airs that animate the human body. Number 8, 10 wings of the Chinese I Ching as given in the Book of Changes. Number 9, 10 deities of the Japanese Shinto. Number 10, 10 stages of Buddhahood. Number 11, 10 classes of deities of the Tibetans. Number 12, 10 commandments of Yahweh of the Bible. Number 13, 10 adults constituting the basic quorum of the Congregation of Israel for full liturgical proceedings. Number 14, the number 10 as in the Temple of Jerusalem built by Solomon. That is the diameter of the molten sea, the number of oxen, levers, candlesticks of gold, tables on other side of the sea near the altar, etc. Now we come to the height in cubits of the altar is 10, diameter of the molten sea is 10, number of oxen 10, number of levers 10, number of candlesticks of gold 10, number of tables on either side of the molten sea 10. Now adding up to the list, we have number 15 as basis of the rod and ring symbols of the Bible. There are many instances of the rod and ring symbols in the Bible, as I have already mentioned, of which one that is very important in the New Testament and the church liturgy, especially that relating to the Holy Sacrament of wedding. That is the gold ring on the ring finger, which symbolizes, as the church teaches, the ring symbolizes the body and blood of Christ, and the on the finger, which represents the self, that is symbol of the self of Christ. So there is actually a song in the marriage liturgy, വിരലിൻ മേൽ മെയ് രക്തങ്ങൾ മോതിരമായി என்பர் കേകി ഈത്തോനോ കൽസേതമറൈമോ ഹുമറോ ഇദസ് കുദിശോ ലീതു ബൈലി മാൻബക്കറാൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു there is a Syriac song of which this is the translation of one or two lines. Okay. The next one, 16, is 10 paths to Kundalini Yoga. Number 17, 10 as Vedic Purusha number. 18, 10 as related to 1 by 10 as tithe to God. 19, the first one and the last O symbols of the tree of life model of DNA which I have presented in earlier lectures and which I will further present with a novel and new explanations and data later. The above God number 10 further reduces to the supreme cell number 1, 1 plus 0 equals 1. The 1 and 2 symbols are at once alphabets of English and numerals 1 and 0 of arithmetics. In other words, they are alphabeto-numeric symbols of life and divinity in one. The I and O symbols strangely stand at the alpha and omega positions of the IHSO of DNA and the Christogram, as I have already explained. So it starts in the I, ends in the O. These are also numeric symbols of the biblical rod and ring and appear as binary values 1 and 0 in digital information coding. All numbers linked to DNA and the genetic code are also linked to God and creativity. Creativity is a higher faculty of life. It is life that creates. It is not alien to science as evolutionists teach. It is time that this word is included in the scientific literature with clear definitions of life, God, and creation drawn from new evidences from molecular biology, the type of which I have already presented and will present further details as this series goes on. There is strange connectivity between consciousness and creativity. Where consciousness operates, creativity also operates. This is clear from the overlapping of the physical life numbers linked to DNA and the genetic code with the divine life numbers. As I have shown in table 10.3, numeric patterns linked to life in biology and the Bible, which those interested can refer. Now, success in tracing the mystery of life lies in our ability to link the objective knowledge of science with the wisdom and consciousness provided by subjective disciplines. They must somehow be brought to a common platform for intellectual engagements to sort out the mystery of life in a give-and-take approach to be developed into the biology of the future. Indications are that it is really possible. There is much for ideological biology to learn from the life science of religions, which is nothing but the science of consciousness of a higher dimension. Actually, in fact, scientists are going away from final solutions of life in that they are alienating science and religion. Actually, religions can lead science in ideological formulations on the nature and meaning of life and the principle of life called the consciousness, of which pure consciousness is what they call God, supreme consciousness, and the self of man is only an image, a likeness, a reflection as pure consciousness of the supreme consciousness, also called the Creator. Thank you.